The sensors on the bridge of the Imperial Dreadnought, Celestial Dominance, flickered with an anomaly that shouldn't exist. Lieutenant Vex Thor, a Krillian with blue-gray skin and 4 eyes designed to process multiple data streams simultaneously, stiffened at his console. His primary eyes focused on the holographic display, while his secondary pair scanned the raw sensor data scrolling across his personal screen. "Commander Rilvax," he called out, his voice carrying the subtle harmonic overtones characteristic of his species. "I'm detecting an unidentified vessel approaching from Vector 973. Commander Rilvax, a towering Thessian warrior whose ancestors had conquered 17 star systems, turned from the observation window. Her crimson armor gleamed under the bridge lights, each plate inscribed with honors from 3 decades of service to the Galactic Imperium. She crossed the bridge in 4 long strides, her boots creating rhythmic thuds against the metal floor. "Identification codes?" she demanded. Vex Thor's fingers danced across his console, pulling up layer after layer of protocol queries. Each one returned the same result. "None, Commander. The ship isn't transmitting any recognition signals. No Imperial registration, no commercial license, no diplomatic credentials. According to our database, it simply doesn't exist." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. In the 3,000 years since the Galactic Imperium had unified the known galaxy under its rule, every vessel from single-pilot scouts to massive colony ships had been catalogued, registered, and tracked. The Empire's bureaucracy was legendary in its thoroughness. Ships that didn't exist in the system were either experimental military prototypes or something far more dangerous. "Pirates?" suggested the tactical officer, a young Drexian named Korth, who had only recently earned his position. Rilvax shook her head. "Pirates use stolen vessels with forged credentials. They don't broadcast their illegality. What's the ship's heading?" Vex Thor felt his secondary hearts skip a beat as he ran the calculations. "It's coming right at us, Commander. Direct intercept course." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Battle stations, raise shields and charge primary weapons. Open all channels and transmit standard warning protocols in all registered languages." Alarms began their rhythmic pulse throughout the dreadnought. Thousands of crew members rushed to their positions, a well-oiled machine responding to potential threat. The Celestial Dominance was one of the Empire's finest warships, capable of reducing entire planets to molten slag. It had been stationed at the edge of the Terminus sector for the past 8 years, guarding one of the most remote and strategically important regions of Imperial space. "Broadcasting now," reported the communications officer. The message went out in 347 languages, each one warning the approaching vessel to identify itself immediately or face destruction. Silence answered them. Rilvax watched the tactical display as the unknown ship continued its approach. It was moving at speeds that shouldn't be possible for anything except the Empire's most advanced interceptors, yet the sensor profile suggested it was significantly larger than that. "Give me visual," she ordered. The main view screen shifted from its display of local space to focus on the approaching vessel. When the image resolved, several crew members gasped. The ship was unlike anything in the Imperial database. Its hull was a matte gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The design was angular but elegant, with lines that suggested both functionality and an aesthetic sense completely foreign to galactic architecture. No visible weapons ports marked its surface. No engine exhausts glowed with recognizable power signatures. "What are we looking at?" Rilvax asked, though she directed the question more to herself than her crew. "Sensors are having difficulty getting clear readings," Vex Thor reported, his voice tight with confusion. "The hull composition is interfering with our scans. I'm detecting energy readings, but they don't match any known power system. It's like the ship is wrapped in some kind of dampening field." The vessel continued to close the distance. It was now near enough that even basic optical systems could track it without enhancement. The ship moved with a grace that seemed almost organic, making minor course corrections that suggested either a highly advanced AI or a pilot with reflexes beyond anything seen in Imperial space. "Distance?" Rilvax asked. 300,000 kilometers and closing. At current speed, it will enter weapons range in 90 seconds. The commander straightened, her hand resting on the command console. "Power up the main cannons. Target the vessel's propulsion systems. Prepare to fire on my command." The dreadnought hummed with barely contained energy as its primary weapons charged. Each cannon was capable of punching through the shields of any known warship. Together, they represented enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. "Still no response to our hails," the communications officer reported. "Target locked," the weapons officer confirmed. Rilvax opened her mouth to give the order when something impossible happened. The unknown vessel, still traveling at tremendous speed, simply stopped. No deceleration burn, no gradual reduction in velocity. It went from moving to motionless in an instant, as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions it chose not to follow. "Did you see that?" Vexthor whispered. The sudden stop should have turned anything inside that ship into paste against the forward bulkheads. No inertial dampener in the galaxy could compensate for that kind of instantaneous velocity change. Before anyone could respond, the ship's communication array lit up with an incoming transmission, not on any of the standard channels the Empire used, but on an ancient frequency that hadn't been utilized for warfare in over 1,000 years. The frequency associated with formal declarations between sovereign powers. "They're trying to communicate," the communications officer said, her voice uncertain. "Should I open the channel?" Rilvax nodded slowly. Whatever this ship was, it knew protocols that predated the modern empire. That suggested either extensive historical research or something far more unsettling. The view screen flickered as the channel opened. The image that appeared made every being on the bridge freeze in confusion and ancient, instinctual fear. The creature on the screen was bipedal, standing perhaps 2 meters tall. Its skin was a light tan color, covered partially by a dark blue uniform adorned with insignia no one recognized. The face was flat, with forward-facing eyes, a small nose, and a mouth that revealed white teeth as it smiled. "Greetings," the creature said in perfect galactic standard, the common tongue of the Empire. Its accent was strange, placing emphasis on unexpected syllables, but the words were clear. "I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, representing the United Earth Federation. I apologize for the dramatic entrance. We've been trying to reach someone in authority for the past 3 months, but all our standard communication attempts have been ignored or classified as spam by your automated systems." Rilvax found her voice, though it took effort. "Terran? Earth? These names are not in our database. Where do you come from?" The human's smile widened slightly. "That's a complicated question. Your database wouldn't have us because we've never had contact with your civilization before. Earth is located in what we call the Orion arm of the galaxy. I believe your current maps classify that entire region as the unmapped territories." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the bridge crew. The unmapped territories were legendary, a vast section of space that defied all attempts at exploration. Ships sent to investigate either returned with scrambled sensor logs or didn't return at all. The Empire had declared the region off-limits over 200 years ago after losing an entire exploratory fleet. "That's impossible," Vexthor said, forgetting protocol in his shock. "Nothing can survive in the unmapped territories. The spatial anomalies alone would tear apart any vessel." Commander Chen's expression became sympathetic. "Ah, yes. We wondered about those. Turns out they're artificial, part of an ancient defense network left by a precursor civilization. We've been working on understanding and navigating them for about 500 years now. Took us a while, but we finally cracked the pattern. 500 years. The number hung in the air like a challenge. The Empire's best scientists and most advanced AI systems had declared the unmapped territories permanently inaccessible after just 50 years of study. "What do you want?" Rilvax asked, her military training reasserting itself. Diplomacy could come later. Right now, she needed to understand whether this vessel represented a threat. "To talk," Chen replied simply. "We've become aware of the Galactic Imperium's existence through long-range observations and some intercepted communications. We've been watching your borders for approximately 120 of your standard years, learning your languages, studying your culture. We believe it's time to introduce ourselves formally and discuss potential relations between our peoples. 120 years of observation, and you chose now to reveal yourselves?" The commander's suspicion was evident in her tone. "Why?" The human's expression grew serious. "Because 3 months ago, we detected something in deep space that concerns both our civilizations. A fleet, or what we believe to be a fleet, approaching from beyond the galactic rim. The signatures don't match anything in our databases or what we've learned of your technology. Given the trajectory and speed, this fleet will reach the outer territories of your empire in approximately 14 months. Rilvax felt ice form in her veins. An unknown threat from beyond the galactic rim was the nightmare scenario that the Empire's strategic planners had worried about for centuries. The Imperium had conquered the known galaxy, but there was always the question of what lay beyond. "You have proof of this?" she demanded. "Comprehensive sensor logs, analysis by our best scientists, and predictive models that we've been refining for the past 3 months. We came to share this information because whatever is coming, it's big enough to be a problem for everyone in this galaxy." The bridge was silent as everyone processed the implications. If this human was telling the truth, and Rilvax's instincts suggested she was, then the Empire faced a potential crisis of unprecedented scale. "Commander Rilvax," Chen continued, her tone becoming more formal, "my government has authorized me to request an official meeting with representatives of the Galactic Imperium. We have information to share, and we'd very much like to discuss how Earth and the Imperium might work together to address this common threat." The Thessian commander straightened, making a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Stand by, Commander Chen. I need to transmit this to Imperial Command. This is beyond my authority to address." "Of course," the human replied. "We'll wait. We've been patient this long. A few more hours won't matter." As the communication cut, Rilvax turned to her communications officer. "Send an encrypted priority transmission to Imperial Command. Classification level Omega. Tell them we've made contact with an unknown civilization from the unmapped territories, and they're bringing warning of an invasion from beyond our galaxy." The officer's hands shook slightly as he input the commands. A message with Omega classification hadn't been sent in over 300 years. It indicated a threat to the very existence of the Empire itself. While they waited for a response, Vexthor continued his sensor analysis of the human vessel. What he found defied explanation. The ship's power generation system was unlike anything in Imperial engineering. It seemed to manipulate space-time itself, drawing energy from quantum fluctuations in the vacuum of space. The weapons systems, though currently dormant, showed energy potential that made him recalculate his readings 3 times to ensure he wasn't misinterpreting the data. "Commander," he said quietly, calling Rilvax to his station. When she approached, he showed her his findings. "If these readings are accurate, that single ship possesses firepower equivalent to a full Imperial battle group, and the way it stopped earlier suggests propulsion technology at least 500 years more advanced than anything we have." Rilvax studied the data, her experienced eye recognizing the implications immediately. "They could have destroyed us." "Without effort," Vexthor confirmed, yet they chose to talk instead. The commander nodded slowly, a mixture of respect and wariness filling her thoughts. "Which means either they're genuinely seeking peaceful contact, or they're sophisticated enough to know that diplomacy serves their interests better than aggression. The response from Imperial Command came faster than expected, bypassing 3 levels of normal protocol to reach them directly. When the seal of the Imperial Council itself appeared on the transmission header, everyone on the bridge stood at attention. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Counselor Thexaran, one of the 5 beings who govern the entire Galactic Imperium. His aged features, marked by the purple-tinged scales of his species, conveyed both authority and barely concealed concern. "Commander Rilvax, your transmission has caused quite a stir in the capital," he said without preamble. "The Council has reviewed your sensor logs and the recording of your conversation with this human. We are prepared to authorize first contact protocols. Invite Commander Chen and a small delegation to board your vessel. You will escort them to the capital world immediately. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, Counselor," Rilvax replied, her military bearing impeccable despite the chaos of emotions churning inside her. "And Commander," Thexaran added, his voice dropping to a more personal tone, "be careful. We know nothing about these humans or their true intentions. If this is some elaborate deception, the consequences could be catastrophic. Trust your instincts, but verify everything." The transmission ended, leaving Rilvax with orders that would thrust her into the center of potentially the most important event in Imperial history. She took a deep breath, straightened her armor, and turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to the human vessel." Commander Chen's face appeared again, her expression patient and professional. "The Imperial Council has agreed to your request for a meeting," Rilvax announced formally. "You and a small delegation are invited to board the Celestial Dominance. We will provide escort to the capital world, where you will meet with the Council directly." The human's smile was genuine and warm. "We accept with gratitude. Give us 30 minutes to prepare and we'll shuttle over with a delegation of 5. Is that acceptable?" "That's acceptable. Commander Rilvax out." As the channel closed, the Thessian warrior allowed herself a moment of reflection. In the span of less than an hour, the fundamental nature of the galaxy had changed. Humanity had emerged from the impossible void of the unmapped territories, wielding technology that surpassed the Empire's finest achievements, bringing warning of a threat that could dwarf all previous conflicts. She looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew, seeing her own mixture of excitement and fear reflected back at her. They stood at the threshold of a new era, for better or worse. "All departments prepare to receive guests," she announced, "and someone get me every piece of information we have on bipedal evolutionary biology. I want to know what these humans are capable of before they set foot on this ship." The shuttle bay of the Celestial Dominance hummed with nervous energy as Commander Rilvax stood at the head of a full honor guard. 50 of her finest soldiers lined the walkway, their weapons held in ceremonial position but fully charged and ready. She had chosen warriors from 7 different species, a deliberate display of the Empire's diversity and strength. Medical teams waited in the wings, prepared for any biological incompatibilities. Science officers clutched their scanning equipment, eager to analyze these newcomers from every possible angle. The human shuttle descended through the atmospheric containment field with a grace that made the Empire's best pilots look clumsy by comparison. It was smaller than expected, barely large enough for the promised delegation of 5, yet it moved with the same unsettling precision as the larger ship. The hull was the same light-absorbing gray, and as it settled onto the landing pad without so much as a vibration, Vexthor noted that his sensors still couldn't penetrate its exterior. "No visible propulsion system," he murmured into his communication link to the commander. "No exhaust, no gravitational distortion, nothing. It's like the shuttle is simply telling physics what to do rather than working within its laws." The shuttle's door opened with a soft hiss, and Commander Sarah Chen emerged first. She moved with confident ease despite being surrounded by heavily armed aliens in an environment completely foreign to her species. She wore the same dark blue uniform, and now Rilvax could see details she had missed on the view screen. The human's build was lean and athletic, suggesting a high-gravity world or extensive physical conditioning. Her movements were economical and precise, the bearing of someone with military training. Behind Chen came 4 other humans, 3 males and 1 female, if Rilvax was correctly interpreting the subtle physiological differences. One wore a white uniform with red crosses on the shoulders, likely medical personnel. Another was clearly security, his black uniform and alert posture marking him as protection for the diplomats. The other 2 wore gray uniforms covered in what appeared to be scientific insignia. "Commander Rilvax," Chen said, stopping at a respectful distance and inclining her head in what seemed to be a human gesture of respect. "Thank you for your hospitality. Allow me to introduce my team. This is Dr. Elizabeth Park, our xenobiologist." The woman in white nodded. "Lieutenant Marcus Webb, security." The man in black gave a slight bow. "Doctors James Okonkwo and Yuki Tanaka, our astrophysicists and the ones who first detected the anomalous fleet." Each human performed their own version of a respectful greeting. Rilvax found herself surprised by how expressive their faces were, displaying emotions that were easy to read despite the unfamiliar features. "Welcome aboard the Celestial Dominance," Rilvax responded formally. "I am Commander Rilvax of the Imperial Navy. These are my senior officers." She gestured to Vexthor and the others. "We will escort you to quarters where you can rest before our departure for the capital world." "Actually," Chen interjected politely, "if it's not too much trouble, my scientists would very much like to share our data with your team immediately. Time is a factor, and the sooner your leadership understands the scope of the threat, the better prepared we can all be." Rilvax considered this. The human's eagerness suggested either genuine concern or a very sophisticated manipulation. Her orders were to be cautious but cooperative. "Very well. We'll convene in Conference Room 7. It has facilities for data presentation and enough space for both our teams." As they walked through the corridors of the dreadnought, Rilvax noticed the humans observing everything with sharp intelligence. They weren't gawking like tourists, but analyzing like trained scouts. Their eyes tracked the placement of security cameras, the locations of access panels, the flow of crew traffic, professional assessment, not hostile reconnaissance, but thorough nonetheless. Dr. Park suddenly stopped, her attention caught by a Vrelian crew member passing by. The insectoid being was nearly 3 meters tall with 6 limbs and compound eyes. Most species found Vrelians intimidating, even frightening, upon first encounter. "Fascinating," Park breathed, her eyes lighting up with scientific curiosity. "Exoskeletal structure with what appears to be both hydraulic and muscular systems. The compound eyes suggest a visual spectrum far beyond what we're seeing. Are those sensory organs on the antennae detecting chemical signatures?" The Vrelian, clearly surprised by the interest rather than fear, clicked its mandibles in amusement. "Yes, Doctor. I can taste the curiosity in your pheromone signature. Most species find my kind disturbing." "Disturbing?" Park shook her head emphatically. "You're a xenobiologist's dream. The evolutionary pressures that would produce such efficient biomechanical integration must have been extraordinary. I would love to hear about your homeworld sometime." The Vrelian's antennae perked up with pleasure before it continued on its duties. Rilvax filed the interaction away for later consideration. The humans showed no fear of the alien, only scientific fascination. That suggested either remarkable adaptability or extensive prior experience with diverse life forms. Conference Room 7 was designed to accommodate multiple species simultaneously. The table at its center could adjust height and configuration, the seats could morph to fit different body types, and the atmospheric controls could create separate environment zones if necessary. The holographic projection system at the room's center was state-of-the-art. capable of displaying four-dimensional data in formats that most species could comprehend. Once everyone was settled, Dr. Okonkwo stood and addressed the assembled Imperial officers. What we're about to show you was detected by our deep space monitoring network approximately 3 months ago. We've been analyzing the data continuously since then, and I need to be clear up front that some of what we're presenting remains speculative. However, the core facts are undeniable. He activated his own data device, which interfaced seamlessly with the Imperial systems, despite using completely different technological principles. The hologram flickered to life, showing a representation of the galaxy as viewed from above. A single point at the galactic rim began to pulse. "This is the origin point of the first signals we detected," Okonkwo explained. "Initial readings suggested a large gravity well moving through space. Not moving like a ship, but moving nonetheless. When we focused our most powerful telescopes on the region, we found this." The image zoomed in dramatically. What appeared was a fleet of vessels unlike anything anyone in the room had seen. They were massive, each one larger than the biggest dreadnought the Empire had ever constructed. Their hulls were dark and irregular, as if grown rather than built. They moved in formation, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, stretching across light years of space. "Scale?" Rilvax demanded, her voice tight. Dr. Tanaka spoke up, her accent different from Okonkwo's, but equally fluent in galactic standard. "The smallest vessels are approximately 5 kilometers long. The largest we've detected is just over 30 kilometers. For comparison, your dreadnought here is 3 kilometers. Vexthor felt his secondary hearts begin to race. "How many ships?" "We've identified at least 12,000 individual vessels," Tanaka continued. "And we suspect there are more that we can't detect clearly due to distance and interference. The fleet appears to have some kind of cloaking or dampening technology that makes accurate counting difficult." The room erupted in alarmed conversation. 12,000 ships, each larger than anything the Empire fielded, represented a force that could sweep away all resistance. The Empire's entire military couldn't match those numbers even if every ship was committed to the fight. Rilvax raised her hand for silence. "What else can you tell us about them? Origin? Purpose? Capabilities?" Okonkwo's expression grew grim. "That's where it gets more concerning. We've detected emissions from these vessels that suggest weapon systems operating on principles we don't fully understand. They appear to manipulate gravitational fields as both propulsion and weaponry. We've also detected what looks like matter conversion technology on a scale that defies our current physics." "You're saying they can weaponize gravity itself?" one of the Imperial science officers asked, disbelief coloring his tone. "That's exactly what we're saying," Dr. Park interjected. "And the energy requirements for what we're seeing suggest either a power generation method that surpasses anything our civilizations have developed, or they're drawing power from some external source we haven't identified." Chen stood, taking over the presentation. "Here's what we know for certain. This fleet is headed toward the core of our galaxy. Current trajectory puts them in contact with the outer regions of the Galactic Imperium in 14 months. They've made no attempt to communicate, no acknowledgement of any signals we've sent their way. They simply continue forward at constant speed." "What speed?" Vexthor asked. "0.3 light speed," Tanaka replied, "which, given the mass and size of these vessels, should be impossible with conventional propulsion." Rilvax studied the hologram, her tactical mind already running through scenarios and finding nothing encouraging. "You said you've been watching our borders for over a century. In all that time, why not make contact before now? Why wait until this threat appeared?" Chen met her gaze directly. "Because humanity's history has taught us to be careful about making first contact. We wanted to understand your civilization, your values, your likely reactions before revealing ourselves. We're not a naive species, Commander. We've learned that introducing ourselves to advanced civilizations requires preparation and timing. And you judge this to be the right time? We judge this to be the necessary time, Chen corrected. If we're right about this fleet, then every civilization in this galaxy will need to work together to survive. Humanity alone can't stop this. Your empire alone can't stop this. But together, combining our resources and knowledge, we might have a chance. The statement hung in the air, heavy with implication. Rilvax appreciated the directness even as she weighed the political implications. The Galactic Imperium had never worked with an equal partner. They conquered, absorbed, or occasionally granted protected status to lesser civilizations. But partnership implied equality, and that was something the Empire's leadership would struggle to accept. You speak of working together, Rilvax said carefully, yet you've demonstrated technology far superior to ours. Your ship moved in ways that violate our understanding of physics. You navigated territory we've declared impossible. Why would you need our help? Chen smiled slightly, and Rilvax realized it was a sad expression rather than a happy one. Because superior technology doesn't mean infinite resources or invincibility. Humanity controls approximately 40 star systems. Your empire controls over 1 million. You have industrial capacity, military forces, and resources on a scale we can't match. What we have is knowledge and innovation born from 5 centuries of isolated development in one of the most hostile regions of the galaxy. She pulled up another hologram, this one showing Earth and its surrounding star systems. When humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel, we headed out with optimism and hope. We thought we'd find the galaxy full of advanced civilizations eager to meet us. Instead, we found the unmapped territories, a region where space itself seemed hostile to exploration. We lost ships, colonies, thousands of lives learning to survive there. The hologram shifted, showing timelines and developmental curves. That adversity forced us to innovate or die. We learned to manipulate quantum fields because standard shields couldn't protect us from spatial anomalies. We developed AI-assisted navigation because human reflexes alone couldn't handle the variables. We created power generation systems that tapped into space-time fluctuations because conventional reactors couldn't provide enough energy to keep our ships running in that environment. You're saying your technological advantages came from desperation, Vex Thor observed. Exactly. Lieutenant Webb spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. My grandparents were part of the third wave of colonists into the territories. Half their convoy was lost to spatial rifts before they learned to read the patterns. Every advancement we've made was paid for in lives and hard lessons. Dr. Park added her own perspective. But here's the thing about adversity-driven innovation. It creates specialized solutions. Our technology excels in specific areas where we had to excel to survive. Your empire's technology developed along different paths, optimizing for different problems. There are almost certainly fields where your knowledge exceeds ours simply because you face challenges we never encountered. It was a diplomatic way of suggesting technological parity in some areas, but Rilvax suspected it was also true. The Empire's weapons, for instance, had been refined through countless wars of conquest. Their medical technology had been developed to work across hundreds of different species. Their industrial processes had scaled to manage a million-world economy. What are you proposing specifically? Rilvax asked. Chen's expression became intensely focused. We propose a joint task force. Human scientists and engineers working with Imperial counterparts to analyze the approaching fleet and develop countermeasures. We share our navigational technology for the unmapped territories in exchange for access to your industrial capacity and materials science. We coordinate military planning so that when the fleet arrives, we have a unified defense strategy rather than fighting as separate forces. That would require the Imperial Council to acknowledge humanity as sovereign equals, Rilvax pointed out, Not as subjects, not as protectorates, but as independent partners. The Empire hasn't done that in 3,000 years. Then perhaps it's time the Empire adapted to new realities, Chen replied, not aggressively, but matter-of-factly. The galaxy is changing whether we want it to or not. That fleet coming toward us doesn't care about political structures or historical precedents. It won't negotiate or accept surrender. From everything we've observed, it's a force designed for one purpose: complete conquest or complete annihilation of everything in its path. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Okonkwo pulled up more data, showing projections of the fleet's arrival and its likely impact patterns. The models painted a grim picture. If the fleet maintained its course and speed, it would first encounter the outer colonies of the Empire's terminus sector. Based on observed weapons capabilities, those colonies would fall within days, perhaps hours. From there, the fleet would have access to the entire Imperial infrastructure network. World after world would fall in a cascade of destruction that would take the fleet straight to the capital world itself. Current Imperial military forces, even fully mobilized, would slow the advance, but not stop it. How confident are you in these projections? Rilvax asked quietly. 85% confidence in the timeline, 70% in the capabilities assessment, Tanaka replied. We've been conservative in our estimates, assuming the fleet has capabilities we haven't yet observed. But even our most optimistic models don't show a favorable outcome without significant changes to current defensive postures. Rilvax turned to her own officers. Opinions? Vexthor spoke first. The data appears legitimate. I've been running verification algorithms throughout this presentation, and nothing suggests falsification or manipulation. Either this is the most elaborate hoax in galactic history, or we're looking at an existential threat. The other Imperial officers nodded in agreement. Whatever else they might think about the humans, the threat itself appeared genuine. Very well, Rilvax decided. We proceed as ordered. I'll escort you to the capital world where you'll present this information to the Imperial Council directly. What happens after that is above my authority. Chen inclined her head in that respectful gesture again. That's all we ask, the chance to be heard and to offer our help. What your leaders decide will determine not just humanity's fate, but possibly the fate of every sentient being in this galaxy. As the meeting concluded and the humans were escorted to their quarters, Rilvax remained in the conference room, staring at the hologram of the approaching fleet. She had fought in border conflicts, suppressed pirate operations, and commanded ships in actions against rebellious colonies. But this was different. This was the kind of threat that came once in a civilization's history, the kind that either forged new greatness or led to extinction. She activated her secure communication channel to Imperial Command. This is Commander Rilvax. I've completed initial meetings with the human delegation. Request permission to proceed to Capital World at maximum speed. Also recommend Imperial Council begin convening military and scientific advisory boards immediately. What we're facing requires resources and coordination on a scale the Empire has never attempted. The response came quickly. Permission granted. Safe travels, Commander. And Rilvax? The Council is already convening. They've been reviewing your earlier transmissions. By the time you arrive, they'll be ready to meet with the humans immediately. Rilvax signed off and allowed herself a moment of profound uncertainty. The Empire was about to meet with representatives of an unknown civilization to discuss working together against an impossible threat. Everything about the situation violated established protocols and historical precedents. Yet somehow, as she replayed her interactions with Commander Chen and her team in her mind, Rilvax found herself hoping that the Council would see past tradition and pride to recognize an opportunity. These humans had survived the impossible, developed extraordinary capabilities, and could have remained hidden in their protected territory, waiting for the storm to pass. Instead, they had chosen to emerge and offer help. That suggested values and character worth respecting. Whether the Empire's leadership would see it that way remained to be determined, but Rilvax knew what her own assessment would be when asked. She exited the conference room and headed for the bridge to prepare for their journey. Behind her, the hologram continued to display that ominous fleet of dark vessels, each one a harbinger of potential doom, all of them drawing inexorably closer with every passing moment. The capital world of Imperia Prime hung in space like a jewel carved from 1,000 different precious stones. It was a planet entirely remade by 3 millennia of imperial engineering, with vast cities that stretched from pole to equator and orbital rings that caught the light of 3 distant suns. 50 billion souls called this world home, representing every species that had bent knee to the Galactic Imperium's authority. It was meant to inspire awe and submission in equal measure. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation window of her assigned quarters aboard the Celestial Dominance and studied the approaching world with tactical appreciation rather than intimidation. Marcus Webb stood beside her, his security officer's instincts cataloging defenses and potential threats automatically. Impressive, Webb acknowledged. Orbital defense platforms every 200 kilometers, military shipyards visible even from this distance, and those rings aren't just decorative. I'm reading weapons emplacements integrated throughout the structure. They want us to see it, Chen replied. A demonstration of power designed to put us in our place before negotiations even begin. Is it working? Chen smiled slightly. It's making me think about how Earth would defend itself if we had to. Sometimes seeing someone else's strength helps you identify your own weaknesses and fix them before they become problems. A chime at the door announced Commander Rilvax's arrival. The Thessian warrior entered, her armor polished to perfection for the formal proceedings ahead. We'll be docking at the Imperial Palace in 30 minutes. The Council is assembled and waiting. I've been instructed to brief you on protocol. We're listening, Chen said, turning from the window. Rilvax's expression was carefully neutral. The Imperial Council consists of 5 members representing the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the Empire. Each has served for decades, some for centuries, depending on their species' lifespan. They are accustomed to being the supreme authority in all matters. Contradiction or direct challenge to their statements is considered deeply offensive. They expect obedience rather than debate, Webb observed. They expect respect, Rilvax corrected. But I won't lie to you. Many of them view any civilization not already part of the Empire as either potential subjects or potential threats. The concept of meeting with equals is foreign to them. Chen nodded, having expected as much. What do you recommend? The Thessian commander paused, clearly weighing her words carefully. Be respectful but not submissive. They'll interpret weakness as invitation to dominate. Present your information clearly and factually. If they challenge you, respond with evidence rather than rhetoric. And understand that whatever happens in that chamber, you're not just representing humanity. You're also representing a test of whether the Empire can adapt to changing circumstances. No pressure, then, Webb muttered with dark humor. How do you think they'll respond? Chen asked Rilvax directly. The commander hesitated. Honestly, I think some will see the wisdom of cooperation. Others will see only threat in your existence and opportunity in your desperation. The Empire has always grown through conquest or absorption. Partnership requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability. That's a difficult concept for beings who have spent thousands of years being invulnerable. The journey from docking bay to council chambers took them through corridors designed to overwhelm. The walls displayed the history of the Galactic Imperium's expansion, each conquered world represented in glowing murals. The ceilings soared 30 meters high, making even large beings feel small. Guards from a dozen warrior species stood at attention every 50 paces, their weapons and armor representing the finest military technology in the galaxy. Doctors Park, Okonkwo, and Tanaka took it all in with scientific fascination, quietly recording observations and making notes about the various species they encountered. Chen appreciated their focus. This wasn't tourism, but intelligence gathering, documenting everything that might prove useful in future interactions. The council chamber itself was a circular room with a raised platform at its center. 5 thrones arranged in a semicircle occupied the platform, each designed for the specific physiology of its occupant. The walls were transparent, offering a view of Imperia Prime below and the stars beyond. Galleries surrounding the main floor held hundreds of observers. High-ranking military officers, senior diplomats, scientific advisors, and influential nobles. This meeting was being witnessed by the most powerful beings in the Empire. The 5 counselors were already seated as the human delegation entered. Counselor Thex Aron, whose purple-scaled face Chen recognized from the initial transmission, occupied the central throne. To his left sat Counselor Vreemal, a crystalline being whose body refracted light in hypnotic patterns. To his right was Counselor Torash, a massive ursine creature covered in metallic-looking fur. The 4th counselor, Shithan, appeared almost human at first glance, until Chen noticed the 3rd eye in the center of her forehead and the subtle way her form flickered between dimensions. The 5th counselor, Correx, was the Vrelian that Dr. Park found so fascinating, though this one was clearly ancient, with battle scars marking every segment of its exoskeleton. "Approach," Thexaron commanded, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. Chen led her team forward, stopping at what she judged to be a respectful distance. She performed a formal bow, not the servile deep bend of a subject, but the respectful acknowledgement of one leader greeting others. "Honored counselors, I am Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Federation. On behalf of humanity, I thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "You bring warnings of threats and requests for alliance," Thexaron stated. "These are bold claims from a civilization that exists in records only as rumors and failed exploration missions. The unmapped territories have been our home for 5 centuries, Chen replied calmly. We didn't choose isolation, but we adapted to it. The spatial anomalies that prevent your ships from navigating that region are real, but they follow patterns that can be learned and predicted." Counselor Vreemal's crystalline form pulsed with shifting colors. "You claim to have mastered navigation through quantum instabilities that defeated our most advanced vessels. A convenient claim that cannot be verified." Chen had expected skepticism. "Actually, it can be verified easily. My ship, the diplomatic envoy, is still in orbit. Your sensors have been analyzing it since we arrived. Dr. Tanaka, please display the navigational logs." The astrophysicist stepped forward and activated a holographic projection showing 3-dimensional maps of the unmapped territories with safe routes marked in glowing pathways. These are real-time navigation charts updated by our automated probe network. The patterns shift on a regular cycle, approximately 73 standard hours. By tracking these shifts and mapping them against spatial coordinates, we've identified stable corridors through the region. Counselor Tarash leaned forward, his massive form creating shadows across the platform. "Even if your navigation claims are true, they explain only how you survived in isolation. They don't explain why we should trust you or ally with you." "Trust is earned, not demanded," Chen agreed. "We don't ask for blind faith. We ask that you review the evidence we've brought regarding the approaching fleet and make your own assessment. If you judge the threat to be genuine, then cooperation serves both our interests. If you judge it to be fabricated or exaggerated, we'll return to our territory and prepare to face what's coming alone." The directness of the response seemed to surprise several counselors. Shathan, the dimensional being, spoke for the first time, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she existed partially in other phases of reality. You would simply leave if we refuse you? We would, Chen confirmed. Humanity survived 5 centuries without the Empire's knowledge or assistance. We can continue to do so if necessary. But survival isn't the same as thriving, and facing an existential threat alone isn't the same as facing it with allies. We believe cooperation serves everyone's interests. If you disagree, that's your right. Counselor Corex's mandibles clicked in what those familiar with Vrelians recognized as amusement. You have boldness for a supplicant. Most who come before this council seek to ingratiate themselves, to promise obedience in exchange for protection. We're not supplicants, Chen corrected carefully but firmly. We're potential partners offering information and cooperation. There's a difference. Humanity has no interest in being absorbed into the Empire. We have our own government, our own culture, our own way of doing things. What we're offering is a strategic alliance against a common threat. The chamber erupted in conversation as hundreds of observers reacted to the statement. The idea of a civilization refusing imperial protection and instead offering partnership was unprecedented. Several military officers in the gallery looked offended. Others appeared intrigued by the audacity. Thexarin raised a hand for silence. You speak of partnership while knowing nothing of our military capabilities. Perhaps your isolation has left you ignorant of the Empire's strength. We command fleets that could reduce your 40-star systems to ash within a week. We're aware of your military capabilities, Chen replied evenly. Just as you're now aware that our single ship demonstrated technology superior to anything in your current arsenal. Neither of us benefits from threats or posturing, Counselor. What matters is the fleet approaching from beyond the galactic rim. She gestured to Dr. Okonkwo, who brought up the holographic display of the Dark Fleet. The image filled the center of the chamber, impossible to ignore. This is what our monitoring systems detected 3 months ago. 12,000 vessels, potentially more, each larger than your biggest dreadnoughts, moving at 0.3 light speed using propulsion systems we don't understand, weapons capabilities that appear to manipulate gravity itself, and a trajectory that will bring them into contact with the outer territories of your empire in 14 months. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the threat became visible. Chen watched the counselor's reactions carefully. Thexaran's eyes widened slightly. Vrimal's colors shifted toward darker, more agitated patterns. Torash's fur bristled. Shathan's flickering became more rapid. Only Krex remained outwardly calm, though his antennae were pointed forward in intense focus. We've prepared detailed analysis of the fleet's composition, trajectory, and capabilities, Okonkwo continued. With your permission, I'd like to present our findings to your military and scientific advisors for independent verification. Permission granted, Thexaran said, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by focused attention. But first, explain how humanity detected this fleet when our own deep space monitoring systems, which extend far beyond our borders, detected nothing. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward for this answer. 2 reasons. First, our monitoring network was specifically designed to watch for threats from beyond the galactic rim, because that's where we expected potential danger to originate. Your systems focus primarily on internal threats and known space. Second, we're using detection methods based on gravitational lensing and space-time distortion rather than electromagnetic emissions. The approaching fleet isn't broadcasting signals. It's warping space around itself, and that's what we detected. Counselor Vrimal pulsed with interest. Gravitational detection networks. We have theoretical models for such systems, but never developed them operationally because the energy requirements were considered impractical. The unmapped territories forced us to solve the energy problem, Tanaka explained. When you're trying to navigate through regions where space itself is unstable, you need massive computational power and energy to process navigation data in real time. The same systems work well for deep space monitoring. Marcus Webb had remained silent throughout the proceedings, but now he spoke up, his security officer's perspective adding new information. There's something else you should know about this fleet. We've detected no life signs, no heat signatures consistent with biological occupants, no electromagnetic chatter that would indicate crew communications. Either these ships are carrying beings we can't detect with our current technology, or they're completely automated. That statement sent another ripple through the chamber. Automated warfare on the scale being described represented a nightmare scenario. An enemy that didn't need food, didn't feel fear, didn't tire, and couldn't be negotiated with. Counselor Tarash spoke grimly. An automated fleet of conquest. It would explain the lack of communication, the single-minded trajectory, the apparent disregard for anything in its path. Or it could be piloted by beings so alien that our detection methods simply don't recognize them as living creatures, Dr. Park added. We're making assumptions based on limited data. The truth is, we don't know what we're facing. That's why we need cooperation. More sensors, more analysis, more perspectives looking at the problem. Shathan's form stabilized as she focused her attention. You mentioned earlier that you'd been watching our borders for over a century. What have you learned about us in that time? It was a test, Chen recognized. An attempt to gauge humanity's intelligence-gathering capabilities and possibly its intentions. We've learned that the Galactic Imperium is vast, powerful, and remarkably stable for a civilization of its size. We've observed that you've achieved peace through strength, unity through common governance, and prosperity through integrated trade networks spanning 1,000,000 worlds. We've also observed that your expansion stopped approximately 200 years ago, not because you reached natural limits, but because you chose to consolidate and perfect what you had rather than continuing to conquer. You approve of conquest? Krex asked, mandibles clicking. We recognize historical reality, Chen countered. Every major civilization in galactic history has expanded through some form of conquest or forced integration. Earth's history includes similar patterns. What impresses us about the Imperium isn't that you conquered, but that you managed to create lasting stability afterward. Most empires collapse under their own weight. Yours has thrived. It was a diplomatic answer that acknowledged reality without condoning it, praising stability without endorsing the methods that achieved it. Several counselors seemed to appreciate the nuance. Thexeran leaned back in his throne, studying the human delegation with eyes that had evaluated countless situations over his long life. You've presented compelling evidence and argued your case well. But partnership requires more than shared danger. It requires compatible values and mutual respect. The Galactic Imperium was built on principles of order, unity, and the efficient administration of resources across diverse populations. What principles guide humanity? Chen took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine whether cooperation was possible. Humanity values individual freedom within collective responsibility. We believe in the right of civilizations to govern themselves according to their own values while recognizing obligations to the broader community. We've learned through hard experience that diversity of thought and approach produces better solutions than rigid uniformity, and we believe that strength comes not just from military power, but from innovation, adaptability, and the ability to work with others despite differences. These principles sometimes conflict with imperial governance, Thexeran observed. They do, Chen acknowledged honestly. We're not suggesting the Empire adopt our system or that we adopt yours. We're suggesting that for this specific threat, we set aside philosophical differences and focus on the practical problem of survival. After the crisis is resolved, both civilizations can return to governing themselves as they see fit. Counselor Vreemal's crystalline form pulsed thoughtfully. A limited alliance with defined scope and duration. That's more palatable than open-ended integration. Precisely, Chen agreed. We propose a joint task force with clear objectives. Analyze the approaching fleet, develop defensive strategies, coordinate military response if necessary, and share relevant technology for those specific purposes. Once the threat is resolved, the task force dissolves and both civilizations maintain their independence. The five counselors looked at each other, communicating through subtle gestures and expressions that Chen couldn't fully interpret. Finally, Thexaren spoke. This council needs time to deliberate and consult with our military and scientific advisors. You will be given comfortable quarters in the diplomatic sector. We will reconvene in 72 standard hours with our decision. Chen bowed respectfully. We appreciate your consideration and await your decision. As the human delegation was escorted from the chamber, Chen could feel hundreds of eyes watching them, some hostile, some curious, some calculating. The Empire was being forced to confront a reality it had never truly faced, the existence of a civilization that was neither subject nor enemy, but something else entirely. The quarters assigned to the human delegation were luxurious by any standard, with adaptive furniture, environmental controls, and security systems that were simultaneously protective and restrictive. They were guests, but they were also potential threats being carefully monitored. That evening, as the three suns of Imperia Prime set in sequence, creating a cascade of colors across the cityscape below, Chen's team gathered to discuss their assessment. They're going to say yes, Dr. Park predicted. The threat is too real to ignore, and they know it. But they'll attach conditions, Webb added. Access to our technology, probably observers embedded with our people, restrictions on what we can and cannot do. Which we'll accept as long as the core partnership remains viable, Chen said. We knew this wouldn't be simple. The Empire needs time to adjust to the idea that they're not the sole power in the galaxy. Okonkwo pulled up his data pad, reviewing calculations he'd been running since the council meeting. I've been thinking about something. If the Empire mobilizes fully and we coordinate our defensive efforts properly, we might actually have a chance against that fleet. But it requires both sides committing completely. Half measures won't work. Then we make sure they understand the stakes, Chen replied. Not through threats or manipulation, but through clear, honest communication. We show them that working together is the only path that doesn't end in disaster. 3 days later, the human delegation was summoned back to the council chambers. This time, the galleries were even more crowded, with representatives from 100 different species present to witness the decision. Commander Rilvax stood among the military officers, her expression hopeful but guarded. Thexaren stood, his aged form still projecting authority. We have reviewed your evidence, consulted with our finest minds, and deliberated on the path forward. The approaching fleet represents a clear and present danger to all civilizations in this galaxy. Therefore, the Imperial Council accepts humanity's proposal for a joint task force with the following conditions. He outlined terms that were surprisingly reasonable. Shared command structure, mutual technology exchange within defined parameters, clear objectives and timelines, and most importantly, recognition of humanity's sovereignty throughout the process. There were restrictions, certainly, but nothing that would prevent effective cooperation. We accept these terms, Chen responded formally, and we pledge humanity's full commitment to this alliance. As formal documents were prepared and diplomatic ceremonies conducted, Chen felt the weight of historical significance settling on her shoulders. Two civilizations that had developed in isolation, each believing themselves to be apex powers in their regions, were now binding themselves together against a common threat. It wasn't perfect, and there would be friction ahead, but it was a beginning. Later, as preparations began for the Joint Task Force's formation, Commander Rilvax found Chen on an observation deck overlooking the orbital shipyards where Imperial and human engineers were already beginning collaborative projects. "You did well in the council chambers," Rilvax said. "Better than I expected, honestly. You thought we'd fail? I thought you'd demand too much or accept too little. Instead, you found the middle path that made agreement possible." Chen smiled. "We've had 5 centuries to learn patience and pragmatism. When you're surrounded by hostile space that can kill you in 1,000 different ways, you learn to work with whatever allies you can find and make compromises that serve the greater good." They stood together watching as the first joint construction project took shape, a new class of vessel incorporating both Imperial and human technology. It was a symbol of what could be achieved through cooperation rather than conquest. "That fleet is coming," Rilvax said quietly. 14 months isn't much time to prepare." "No," Chen agreed, "but it's enough time to build something remarkable. The question isn't whether we can stop them alone, because we can't. The question is whether we can build something together that's greater than the sum of our parts." The Thessian warrior nodded slowly. "Then we'd better get to work." Across the galaxy, monitoring stations detected the dark fleet's continued approach. 12,000 ships, perhaps more, moving with inexorable purpose toward the inhabited regions of space. They came without communication, without negotiation, without any indication of mercy or restraint. They were a force that seemed designed for a single purpose: the complete subjugation or annihilation of everything in their path. But now, for the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Imperium wasn't facing a threat alone. Humanity had emerged from the impossible void, bringing with it knowledge, technology, and most importantly, a willingness to stand beside rather than beneath. The alliance was imperfect, the trust incomplete, and the challenges ahead almost insurmountable. Yet, as engineers from 2 civilizations worked side by side, as scientists shared data across cultural divides, and as military strategists planned joint operations, something new was being born. Not conquest, not submission, but genuine partnership between equals facing a common enemy. The Dark Fleet continued its approach. But now it would find not a divided galaxy of isolated civilizations, but a united front of beings who had chosen to stand together. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. But for Commander Sarah Chen, representing humanity among the stars, and for Commander Rilvax, representing an empire learning to see beyond its own borders, the very fact that cooperation was possible offered hope. In 14 months, they would learn if hope was enough. Until then, there was work to be done, alliances to strengthen, and preparations to complete. The future of every sentient being in the galaxy depended on what they built together in the months ahead. It was a responsibility that terrified and inspired in equal measure, and somewhere in the void between galaxies, the Dark Fleet continued its journey, unaware that its arrival would mark not the end of galactic civilization, but the beginning of something entirely new.